All right, today we are diving deep and unlocking the user's guide to a very particular kind of mind. You know the one? It processes the world with way more depth, a lot more intensity, and just more awareness. If that sounds even a little bit familiar, then you are definitely in the right place.
It's this weird paradox, right? On one hand, you see patterns that nobody else does. But on the other, you feel mentally drained, totally overwhelmed, even when, on the surface, everything seems fine. If you're nodding along right now, trust me, you are not alone. And there's a really clear psychological reason for this feeling.
And this is a huge mindset shift. Being highly intelligent doesn't mean you don't have struggles, it just changes what those struggles look like. So what you might see as some kind of personal flaw is often just a sign of how you're built. Your brain is literally wired to process reality on a deeper level.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start by looking at your mind's unique operating system. Then we'll get into the price and the power that comes with it. And finally, we'll talk about how to turn this very difference into your absolute greatest strength.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics. Think of your mind like a high-performance computer. It's got a special operating system, and there's one core function that really sets it apart from all the others, a function that most people completely overlook.
This right here is the secret ingredient, cognitive inhibition. It's your brain's amazing ability to just hit pause between a feeling and an action. So instead of firing back an angry reply to an email, this function gives you that split second of space to think, to reason, and to choose a much smarter response. This is the absolute bedrock of intelligent decision-making.
And that quote just nails it. This kind of mental control isn't about being cold or emotionless. Not at all. It's actually a sign of incredible cognitive strength. It's the ability to kind of zoom out, see the whole chessboard, think about the consequences, and then decide how to act, instead of just being pulled around by your gut reactions. But, running this high-performance operating system, it's not free. It comes at a cost. This depth of processing creates a whole set of unique psychological struggles that are honestly often deeply misunderstood, not just by others, but by ourselves too.
Let's see if any of this sounds familiar. Does your mind constantly have that replay button pushed on conversations? Do you get almost physically pained by repetitive, mindless tasks? Or how about that feeling of being completely alone even when you're in a big crowd? Maybe you question rules, not because you're trying to be difficult, but because you just have to understand the logic behind them. These aren't just random quirks. They're the direct result of a brain that's wired for deep, nonstop processing.
And here's the big reframe. That constant mental churn, it isn't automatically anxiety. And getting bored out of your mind with simple stuff, that's not laziness. It's cognitive depth. It's a sign that your brain is hungry. It needs complexity, it needs challenge, and it needs new things to feel engaged and healthy. So if your brain is always running at full throttle, it leads to a really crucial survival skill, protecting your mental energy. You have to become super strategic about where you spend that energy because you know you've got a limited supply. This is exactly where the wires get crossed with other people. Someone who needs alone time gets labeled antisocial, but the reality is they just need to decompress. Someone who regulates their emotions gets called cold and distant. Nope, they're just emotionally regulated. It's not about being unfriendly or lazy. It's about avoiding social overload and intelligently conserving your mental fuel. These are smart self-preservation strategies, not character flaws. And sometimes this can lead to something called protective withdrawal. When you realize you're always the one reaching out, or that every social interaction feels like you're putting on a performance, well, your brain does the math. It concludes that silence is a much safer, more energy-efficient choice. It's not about rejecting other people. It's a very necessary way to protect yourself from getting completely drained. And you see this energy conservation pop up in some pretty interesting ways, like preferring winter because the quiet and muted colors mean less sensory information for your brain to process, or really disliking having guests over because playing host requires a ton of social monitoring and emotional work. And of course, that deep, deep love for just staying home, because it's the one place where your brain can finally power down and just breathe. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the challenges. Now, let's flip the coin. Let's talk about the incredible strengths that come from being wired this way. These are the superpowers, the tools that really define an independent thinker. See, an independent mind just doesn't run on likes or what other people think. The main question isn't, is this popular? It's, does this actually make sense to me? They might not get that big collective buzz about a fresh start on New Year's because their motivation comes from the inside. It's not tied to a date on the calendar.
They are just fundamentally built to look for substance, not spectacle.
I love this idea. A lot of people get their sense of identity from outside groups, right? Like being a fan of a sports team or part of a club. But an independent thinker usually has a much more stable, internally defined sense of who they are. Their identity doesn't crash if their team loses, because it's grounded in their own values and their own goals. And here's the best part of all. This kind of intelligence, this way of thinking, it's not set in stone. You can actively train your brain to think with even more depth and clarity. Let's walk through a few really powerful habits that can help you do just that. Now, these habits might seem simple, but their impact is huge. First, practice that mental pause we talked about, just a second before you react. Second, read stuff that's actually hard for you. That feeling of struggle, that's your brain building new muscle. Third, never just accept things at face value. Always ask why to get to the real systems underneath. And finally, test yourself. Try to explain a really complex idea in super simple terms. If you can do that, you truly own it.
The big idea here is that you're in the driver's seat. It's not about being born a genius. It's about building consistent habits that encourage deeper, more structured thinking. And that consistency is what literally rewires your brain over time. It really is like going to the gym for your mind.
And that brings us to our final, and maybe the most important stop on this journey. It's time to pull all of these ideas together and completely reframe how you see your own internal world.
Just let that one sink in for a second. The mental burnout, feeling like an outsider, the non-stop questioning. These are not signs that you're broken. They are the price of admission. They are the inherent cost of operating a mind that sees and feels and understands the world with a much, much higher resolution.
And that right there is the ultimate takeaway. This isn't about trying to fix yourself or change who you are. It's about finally getting the user's guide to your own mind. Because once you understand the wiring, you can stop fighting against your own nature and start working with it. And that is the massive shift from feeling overwhelmed to feeling truly empowered. So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you know that your mind is fundamentally built for depth, for questioning, and for independent thought, what are you going to do with it? What problem will you solve? What will you build? What will you finally understand now that you have the manual?